I just want to give a really introductory look at what this seminar is all about, which is measuring what counts. From our perspective, there's three things really. It's about designing for impact and being strategic about it. It's about measuring impact, knowing that you're, getting to the goals that you want to get to, that you're making progress. And it's about communicating it. So that might be, if you're a funder, you might be wanting to communicate it to your board, to show the impact that, your community sponsorship program is having. Or it might be that you need to be able to communicate it to a funder to be able to get funding, whether it's from government or a corporate or potentially impact investor, to be able to gain that. And everybody's kind of got their own objectives around that, but I think sometimes we forget about the communication part of it. It's not just enough to kind of measure, but it's about demonstrating that impact as well. So this is the sort of very simple framework for thinking about, well, the way that we think about impact as well. It actually comes from the Centre for Social Impact, which is a great organisation and a great resource. I'd encourage you to look up the Centre for Social Impact. They have some fantastic resources, but also some great educational programs. They look at it in the 3 Ps. So the first one is identifying your purpose. And that's, pretty obvious, but it's about identifying your goals, where you want to get to. Then mapping the process is about understanding and really being able to articulate how that social impact can be achieved. And then knowing if what you're doing is actually making a difference. Measuring performance is about understanding that the circumstances under which things actually do change. And it's also about taking into account, some of the potentially unexpected consequences or outcomes that, that might come out of things that we do, which are, inherently we think are good, but maybe have unintentional consequences. So I think that's a really important thing to talk about in terms of measuring impact as well. So I'm just going to start off with purpose. Now, I don't know if many of you have seen this. It's a TED talk. Simon Sinek. He does the golden circle, and he does it. Actually, it's about businesses really and their communication. But I think it's really important for the non-profit sector. I mean, we all just kind of assume, and social enterprises as well. We all sort of assume that everybody knows the purpose, what we're trying to achieve, the why. Why are we here? What are we doing? But sometimes I think we can get stuck in the weeds. We can get a little stuck kind of on the dance floor, dancing with everyone, just looking at who's around us in our particular circle, when actually what we need to do is kind of climb out of the dance floor and get on the balcony a little bit, look down, see who else is there, see where we think we should be going. So I think the why, everybody knows what they do, the what. The how, some organisations know how they do what they do. Some actually don't. Some of them just sort of like, we're doing this. But these are the things that actually make them special. That's your value proposition, what sets you apart. But the why, very few organisations, maybe more non-profits and social enterprises, but very few businesses actually really articulate a lot of the time the why, the reason that they exist. So it's usually not about making money. That's sort of the outcome. It's about why you exist, what you're looking to do, what you're looking to achieve. And communicating that is really powerful for everyone, whether you're talking about stakeholders or whether you're talking about funders. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was process. This is all about mapping, that sort of design phase I was talking about before. Now, how many people have heard of the logic models or logical frameworks? Yep, fair few, yep. Great. So this will probably be familiar to quite a few of you, but and it is logical. It's not hard, but it's a great way to map out, as a non-profit, social enterprise, any organisation really, government, to map out what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there. So by putting in, the resources that you have, the inputs, the activities that you do, that's all really obvious. We talk about that all the time. We have our, sort of monitoring plans and our project plans and that sort of thing to talk about the activities that we do. And we often already, collect the outputs. How many people came to our event? How many flyers did we distribute? That sort of thing. But the outcomes is where it starts to get really important. And it's really important to differentiate between outputs and outcomes when it comes to measuring impact, because outcomes are the specific changes that you want to see as your part of your program or your project. And that's the thing that we really would like to measure more, to tell you the truth, from a social impact perspective. And then the difference between outcomes and the way that we articulate them anyway, and there's lots of ways that people do, but the difference between outcomes and impact is that impact is a longer term change. So it might take 5, 10, 20 years to get true social impact. For example, to get behaviour change. You know, if you start implementing something now, it literally might take 20 years to get people using more bikes. Let's hope not, but you know, or something to change within the structure of your community. But it's what we're all going for. And it also is really important because it's not just your organisation generally who's going for the impact. It requires collaboration. And it requires people to think outside of their own organisation, to think about who else can be brought in to achieve the longer term goals, or the bigger goals, really. So I guess, you know, quite passionate about being able to articulate the difference between those, and they're both very, very important, but to have your eyes both on outcomes and impact. So we usually want to measure project progress when we talk about measuring social impact at the outcomes level. Sort of doesn't make a lot of sense, but there you go. All right, I'm just going to give this as a very, very simple, but this is the logic model explained. Okay, so you're feeling hungry. Your inputs are you get some food. Your activities are you eat the food. Your outputs are your stomach fills up. But your outcomes are that you feel better. You know, and maybe the impact is, along the track, if you eat more good food, you know, your well-being is better. So that's kind of where we want to get to when thinking about, you know, social and environmental programs. It's a little bit more technical here, but basically we're looking at logic models, right? Mapping out those logical sequences. If we do that, then we can do this. Indicators are how you know you're making progress. So indicators you might use for a component of your logic model. So one of your outcomes, hopefully, it might even be an output. So an indicator could be, you know, how many people came and looked at our website. But it also could be how many people said that they engaged in this behaviour as a result of our program. So indicators, when you're mapping them out as an organisation and looking to measure impact, should be smart. So they should be pretty specific, something that you can actually measure, something that's achievable, attainable to actually, you know, as part of your program. It's not something that you'd have to do with 6 other organisations. It's something that's realistic, and you should be able to put some sort of time limit, time bound on it as well. Also really important, you know, when you're thinking about measuring impact as an organisation, to try to involve your stakeholders, because, you know, in the end it's you know, who are you trying to create impact either for or with? Hopefully it's more on the with side. So bringing in stakeholders, beneficiaries, people that you're working with or for is really, really good when you're talking about measuring, you know, or evaluating your programs. And then the other thing is to always, and I know most people here are, but always have that really ethical kind of framework around thinking about some of those potentially unintended consequences, so that when you talk to people, you talk to them in a very authentic way, not just about getting information. I just wanted to quickly map out, I guess, you know, that what we talked about before. So this is, for example, taking one outcome in a logic model and actually putting a key performance indicator. So, you know, increased awareness of environmental impacts. Well, how many people reported being more aware? They weren't aware before, but they are now, and the actions that they can take. You might use some survey data to understand that. You might use an event report to understand that. And you might do it on a quarterly basis or an annual basis. But it's pretty, you know, this is, I guess, a component of what we'd call a monitoring and evaluation plan. And, you know, you can integrate that into your everyday kind of evaluation activities. And I really think this is also part of what we're trying to get across, is that evaluation is not just something for the end of a project, but something that you can do all the way through if you're systematic about it. I'm just going to give you a quick, you probably can't read that. That's kind of for a purpose, because this is something that I've worked on for a client. You can start to link the inputs, even when there's specific objectives. So in this case, There's some objectives around well-being and environment and promotion and that sort of thing that are more kind of corporate objectives. But then, you know, for a corporate funder or for someone who's wanting to look at a more kind of holistic, so who they're, you know, the impact overall that they're making, they're going to look at, you know, some of the inputs, so the cost benefits. So, you know, what are the inputs? What are the costs? You know, does it meet my kind of strategic goals? What are the outputs? And then what are the, you know, overall impacts, not just maybe for the community, but also for the business. I mean, businesses need to have that, you know, into their mode of operation if they're going to be able to spend money on community projects. The last slide I just wanted to go through was the fact that there are many approaches. So I've sort of gone through a fairly standard, I guess, logical approach to measuring impact. But there's lots of different approaches out there. And it doesn't mean that you have to go and collect every little bit of data. I mean, we know that especially a lot of non-profits don't have the capacity to go out and collect everything. And, you know, the amount of time that takes is ridiculous. Sometimes, you know, some stories are all you need. Some testimonials. It's all about knowing who your audience, who you're trying to communicate to. So, you know, an SROI, for example, I just thought this was a good example because it's something a little bit different. It's a value of a community football club that had an SROI done on it. Anything can have an SROI, really. You know, if it's actually producing some social good or some environmental good, you can measure that.